What if everything Silo told us about the outside world was a lie? Episode 8 may have given us the strongest evidence yet. For 3 seasons, we have been trained to accept one basic fact. The world outside the silos is poisonous. People walk through that door, they breathe the air, and within minutes, they die. That belief is the foundation of the entire system. Cleaning only works because everyone believes leaving the silo means certain death. But Season 3 has started giving us a very different picture. And the strangest part is that the clues were already sitting there. Solo told Juliette something back in Season 2 that sounded like a strange memory from a confused man. When the people of Silo 17 rebelled and eventually reached the surface, they survived for a while. Solo remembered them going outside, putting up a flag, and living through the initial exposure. Then the dust started blowing, and after that, they died. That detail always bothered me. If the atmosphere itself was instantly lethal, why would the timing matter? Why would people survive long enough to organize themselves outside, only to die when this mysterious dust appeared? At the time, there were several possible explanations. Maybe the poison came and went. Maybe something was released from the silos. Maybe Solo's memory was incomplete. Season 3 has now given us another piece of the puzzle. The flashback storyline has revealed what the people behind the Silo project were actually afraid of: nanotechnology. The threat discussed by Per Stenson and Senator Thurman was a form of nanotechnology capable of causing a catastrophic gray goo scenario. The silos were constructed as a survival system against an extinction-level threat, and the technology itself was one of the dangers they were preparing for. Episode 8 also reveals that 50 silos were being built as part of this plan. That changes the way we should look at the surface, because suddenly, Solo's story about the dust sounds very different. What if the dust wasn't ordinary dust? What if the thing killing people outside was a swarm of nanomachines? That would explain something the toxic air explanation has always struggled with. The atmosphere itself could be breathable while the surface still remained deadly. And that distinction matters, because we have now watched people survive situations where contaminated air should have killed them. Look at Lukas. In Episode 8, Lukas is shot while outside. His suit is damaged, and there is a direct opening where the outside environment can reach him. Yet Lukas survives. That scene is extremely difficult to reconcile with the idea that every breath of outside air is immediately lethal. If the environment itself were carrying a persistent airborne poison, a bullet hole through the suit should have been catastrophic. Instead, he remains alive long enough for Kennedy to help him. That does not prove the surface is safe. It does something more useful. It weakens the original explanation. And then there is Juliette. Her journey to Silo 17 already gave us another strange clue. Juliette's protective suit was far better than the suits used by previous cleaners. The tape on that suit eventually began to fail, yet she continued walking. She reached Silo 17 alive. She entered the other silo, and she remained alive. That is a massive problem for the simple version of the toxic air theory, because if the outside atmosphere itself was the killer, every weakness in that suit should have mattered in exactly the same way. Instead, the show keeps separating two things that we used to treat as one problem: the suit and whatever is actually killing people. There is another detail that becomes much stranger once you know about the nanotechnology threat. The cleaners are sprayed with the substance before they leave. We have seen that process since the beginning. For years, the obvious assumption was that this was some kind of protective procedure. Maybe they were being disinfected. Maybe the silo was preventing contamination from coming back inside. But if the outside world is the source of the danger, why is the cleaner being treated before entering it? And why does the treatment seem connected to the short window in which cleaners survive? The theory that has been gaining traction among fans is that this so-called disinfectant could actually be part of the killing system. That would explain why ordinary cleaners die so quickly while Juliette, with her upgraded suit and better protection, survives long enough to reach another silo. There is still a problem with that theory. The show has not explicitly confirmed that the cleaner spray is the poison. And it has not explicitly confirmed that the surface dust is a cloud of nanobots. Those are interpretations. But the pieces are beginning to line up. Solo's memory gives us the dust. Juliette gives us the suit problem, Lukas gives us the damaged suit problem, and the Season 3 flashbacks give us the nanotechnology threat. 4 separate pieces of the story are now pointing toward the same question. If the air itself isn't killing people, then what is? And that leads to an even darker possibility. Maybe the silos were never built simply to protect people from the outside. Maybe the system was designed to control what happens when people try to leave. Because that is the part that has always been strange. The silo residents are told that the outside is deadly. They are shown a beautiful green world through a screen. Then they are sent outside with a suit that is designed to fail. They clean the camera, they walk away, and they die. For decades, that cycle reinforces the same belief. The outside is poison. But if the suit is sabotaged, if the cleaner is exposed to something before leaving, or if a controlled cloud of nanotechnology is released around the silo, then the residents never get to discover the truth for themselves. The system creates its own evidence. That possibility becomes much more interesting when you look at Silo 17. Juliette enters it after crossing the surface. People inside Silo 17 have been living there for years after the rebellion. And when she gets inside, the outside air doesn't suddenly poison everyone. There are procedures for dealing with contamination, but the show has repeatedly given us situations where people interact with the surface environment without immediately suffering the same fate as ordinary cleaners. That has led fans to question whether the deadly conditions are being actively controlled rather than permanently existing everywhere. And if that is true, the word outside becomes misleading. The real danger might be the area around the silos, a controlled zone, a cloud, a release mechanism. Something that can be activated when people attempt to escape. That would also explain why the story keeps focusing on the machinery and infrastructure connected to the silos. Because if the surface itself is permanently toxic, there is very little reason to control when people die. But if something can be released, activated, or directed, then someone has to control it. And Episode 8 quietly gives us another reason to suspect that control exists. The people in the past were preparing for a nanotechnology disaster. The people in the present are living inside a system built around the consequences of that disaster. And between those two timelines is the missing explanation for how the surface became the place everyone fears. The question is whether the world outside was actually destroyed, or whether the silos created their own version of a dead world. There is one detail that makes the nanobot theory especially interesting. Solo's description. He doesn't simply remember people walking outside and dying, he remembers a change. The dust blew, the poison went away for a while, then it came back. That sounds less like a permanently toxic atmosphere and more like something moving through the area. Even the word dust becomes important. A swarm of microscopic machines could look like dust from a distance. And if those machines were designed to spread through the environment, the people inside the silos would have no way to distinguish them from ordinary particles. They would simply see a cloud arrive. Then people would die. For someone like Solo, who witnessed the event as a child, the dust started blowing could be the only description available. This is still theory. The show has not had a character stand up and say, the dust is nanobots. But the season has deliberately introduced nanotechnology into the origin story at exactly the point when the audience is questioning the nature of the outside world. That timing matters. Season 3's flashbacks are showing us how the silos came into existence and what threat their creators were trying to survive. Apple describes the season as an origin story that runs alongside Juliette's present-day struggle, and Episode 8 connects the Silo project directly to the fear of dangerous nanotechnology. So now we can look back at the original story differently. The silos were presented as shelters from an apocalyptic world, but a shelter does not necessarily tell its occupants what happened outside. It only controls access to the outside. That distinction is becoming more important with every episode, because the people running the system clearly have information that ordinary residents don't. They know there are 50 silos. They know about the larger project. They know about the technology that threatens civilization. They know what happens when the safeguard is activated. And the residents know almost none of it. That imbalance of information is the entire foundation of silo society. Which brings us back to the cleaning. Why make cleaning mandatory? Why show every resident the same fake image through the visor? Why give cleaners defective tape? Why make the outside appear beautiful just before the cleaner sees the truth? The psychological effect is obvious. For a few seconds, the person outside believes the world is beautiful. Then the system takes that image away. The cleaner sees the wasteland. They feel betrayed. They clean the sensor. And everyone inside watches them die. That is enough to convince thousands of people that the outside is lethal. The system doesn't need everyone to understand the science. It only needs them to watch enough people die. But if those deaths are being caused by something connected to the silo rather than the global atmosphere, the entire social structure becomes a controlled experiment. That may be why Juliette is so dangerous. She survived. She walked farther than anyone expected. She reached another silo, and she brought information back with her. The first time, she was treated as an anomaly. Now the system has a much bigger problem. Because Lukas has survived a damaged suit, Kennedy has survived outside, people have crossed between silos, and the flashbacks are revealing that the original catastrophe involved nanotechnology. The evidence is becoming harder to keep separated. There is also a competing possibility we shouldn't ignore. Maybe the outside really is dangerous. Maybe the air is safe at certain times, while another substance or mechanism kills people. Maybe the nanotechnology threat created the conditions for the poison rather than replacing it. Maybe the silos can release something into the surrounding environment. Or maybe the dust is connected to the nanotechnology without being the thing that directly kills people. The show still has room to reveal another layer. That is why I wouldn't say episode 8 has literally proven that the outside world is completely safe. It has done something more interesting. It has shown that the explanation we've been given is incomplete. The outside can no longer be treated as one simple block of poisonous air. There are conditions. There are variables. There are systems involved. And somebody appears to understand those systems. That last part may be the biggest clue of all, because if the world itself were the enemy, the silos would only need walls. Instead, they have rules. They have surveillance. They have controlled cleaning procedures. They have specialized suits. They have judicial. They have the algorithm. They have safeguards. And somewhere above all of that is the original plan created to preserve humanity after a technological catastrophe. The silos may have been designed to protect humanity from nanotechnology, but over time, the protection system became indistinguishable from the threat. That would make the outside one of the biggest lies in the entire story. Not because every part of it is fake. The danger may be completely real. The deaths may be real. The contamination may be real. The nanotechnology may be real. The lie could simply be where the danger comes from. And that distinction could explain why Juliette has survived when everyone expected her to die. She isn't immune. She may have simply avoided the exact mechanism that killed everyone else. That is a much more frightening possibility. Because if Juliette can survive the surface, then other people can too. And if other people can survive, the silos aren't prisons because the outside is unlivable. They're prisons because the people inside have been taught that leaving is impossible. That is the question Season 3 still needs to answer. What exactly killed the people of Silo 17? What was the dust? What is being sprayed onto cleaners? Why did Lukas survive after his suit was damaged? And most importantly, who controls whatever is happening outside? Episode 8 hasn't answered those questions yet. It has given us something better for a theory video, a pattern. The old explanation is starting to crack. Solo's story fits the idea of a moving contaminant. Juliette's survival challenges the idea of instantly lethal air. Lukas surviving a damaged suit creates another problem for the same explanation. And the origin story has now placed dangerous nanotechnology directly inside the history of the silos. That is too much information to ignore. So the strongest theory right now is that the surface isn't simply poisonous. The silos may be surrounded by a controlled nanotechnology threat, possibly released or manipulated as part of the system that keeps their populations contained. And if that turns out to be true, the biggest lie in Silo won't be the green world on the visor. It will be the idea that the people inside were ever trapped underground because the world had become unlivable. They may have been trapped because someone wanted them to believe it was.